All right. As people are joining, just to let you know, so I'm Frank Gregory. I lead social intelligence for North Star. We support ad agencies, marketers, and research firms with ad hoc custom social media research, as well as kind of ongoing topic monitoring, brand monitoring, audience segmentation analysis, things like that. So I'll get into all what in a moment, but if you want to get in touch with me, I've already put in the chat my contact information. Definitely let's keep this conversation going past just this 45-minute period. If you have any questions. All right. So I think it looks like we've got about 30 people in here, so we'll go ahead and get started. So ultimately, thanks so much for joining the session. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to learn a little bit more about social intelligence and what that means. Like I said, I'm Frank Gregory. I lead social media intelligence for North Star, this is our first time for North Star at EAMC. We were connected to EAMC through Kim Mahoney at Logics. So thank you, Kim, for giving us the connection to the fine folks here at EAMC, and we're really excited to be involved for the first time. And I'm happy that I'm not going on the same day as Dave Grohl, because I feel like that would have been really hard to follow up. But at the same time, following up on Jeannie Buss earlier today and some others, it's been an incredible trip so far. So we'll go ahead and get started. I do have some slides that I can walk you through in terms of what is social intelligence and the value of it for the event industry. But at the same time, let's make sure that this is a really interactive session. And so if you have any questions, absolutely put them in the chat. From a housekeeping perspective, I realized that as I tested out sharing my screen, I no longer can see everyone or can see the chat room. So Melissa is here from Event Hub to help with if there's anyone that has a question, just put it in the chat, and then absolutely I can field those questions throughout the presentation. We don't have to wait till the end. So let's make this a really good kind of interactive session. But to get started, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start walking you through value of social intelligence. So Melissa, can you confirm that everyone can see my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Okay. Awesome. So first and foremost, like I said, what we're going to walk through today, right? First and foremost, what is social intelligence? What do we mean by this? A lot of people, might have heard of the term social listening or social research, but there's different elements to social intelligence to kind of think of it from a comprehensive perspective. So we're going to go over that. We're going to talk a little bit about what data is available and what's not, but then really get into the meat of, why should I care? Right? If I'm attending this breakout session and I work in the event marketing industry, why do I care about social intelligence? What's the value to my organization? And some examples of actionable insights. And then how do you get started? Right? So some questions yourself up front, as well as some of the recommended tools that I would recommend, as well as kind of the Scrappy way to go about it if you're constrained by budget or constrained by time, etc., or maybe you don't have some of those tools to get started and you still want to gain those insights from social intelligence. So first and foremost, what is social intelligence, right? So it's more than just thinking about, what are the likes and comments and shares and retweets that our engagement is getting on our social platforms, as well as the reach that our social platforms are getting. It's really more of thinking about it from a comprehensive perspective, thinking about all the different social analysis approaches that can help you gain insight into what consumers are saying about relevant topics, everything from, what people are saying about the COVID vaccine all the way to who's winning the chicken sandwich wars. I mean, you can pull in conversation about any topic. And so, really getting an understanding of kind of the finger on the pulse of what people are saying in social media, both now and historically, as well as where brands currently are fitting into those conversations. And then people learn more about custom audiences and interests based on what they're saying in social media on public social, so that you can understand where there might be some synergies between your brand and another brand, right? Your venue and a brand that might be a perfect partner for you. And so we'll dive into all of those different elements in detail. But first and foremost, kind of the base of it is social listening. You might have heard of the term social listening. It's at its core, it is what are people saying about X topic on social media, right? And so you can plug in keywords and hashtags and phrases into a social listening tool query, and then it's going to be able to give you the public conversation around that topic right now, as well as pull back historically. And I'll get into the different channels and what's available and what's not, but ultimately you're able to see what the consumers are saying about a specific topic, like live music or like concerts or sports, etc., and see what those conversation shifts have been over time. Building on social listening is audience segmentation, and I think this is really where there's a lot of meaty insight here in terms of what the event marketing industry can gain from audience segmentation in social media. This is where you have the common interests and lifestyle traits of people who follow X handle. Right? So people who follow your venue, did you know that they actually prefer Pepsi to Coke? Right? Or did you know that they actually engage more with Hilton than Marriott, right? Or whatever the brand might be that you are, or the category you might be looking to partner with within your venue or have as a sponsor. This is where audience segmentation can really help you to kind of put some data behind some of the potential decisions in terms of partnerships with your venue. And then influencer evaluation. This is really about how authentic and engaged is a particular influencer's social audience compared to other influencers that you might want to work with, and what's the mutual overlap between our audience or our target audience for our marketing campaign and a particular influencer. So you're actually looking at letting the data actually tell you which influencers make the most sense for you, as opposed to just kind of going with your gut to say, okay, well, let's work with this influencer because they seem to have a good fit for our brand. And then platform performance is outside of the pyramid, and that's because the fact that it's not really based in social listening. Platform performance is more about your brand's content, right? So with platform performance tools, you can actually look at not just what's our engagement, but you can say our engagement versus our direct competitors, and then our industry overall. So you can say, okay, any venue, anyone that's in the event marketing space, let's look at their brand pages as an industry overall, and let's see when they're talking about a specific topic, what's working well, what's resonating in terms of social content, and what's not. And that's a great way to learn in terms of what creative might make sense for your social posts. But ultimately, since social listening is the base of all of this, I wanted to kind of touch on what is social listening and where there are blind spots if you don't have kind of the processes in place. So, anybody that's been a social admin, part of a social team for a brand would know that, the innermost concentric circle is your posts that you're putting out there. I use the Anthem DC as an example here because I'm local to the DC area. It's one of my favorite venues to go to. They might put out content on their Twitter, on their Instagram, etc. And then the owned channel mentions, the next level up, is where people are tagging them back into commentary. All you need is to be a social admin at the Anthem DC. You're going to get a notification when Joe Smith 25 there says, can't wait to see a show at the Anthem, right? Because he's tagged in with that @ symbol, and you're seeing that. However, the broader perspective of social listening and social intelligence is where you're seeing those outer 3 concentric circles. So the untagged mentions, right? If you don't have a tool that's helping you to understand what people are saying about your brand, then you might not see what Jane Doe 28 said about, part of me wants to start going to concerts at the Anthem again. The other part of me is really hesitant until more people get vaccinated, right? You wouldn't be able to see comments like that on social media if you weren't using a tool to pull in the phrase the Anthem, right? Because she did not tag in the actual handle. And then taking it even further, competitor mentions, wanting to be able to see what people are saying about other arenas in your area. So Eagle Bank Arena is across the river in Virginia, and so it's a great example of wanting to understand people that are in Virginia versus DC. Are they likely to just go to Eagle Bank because likely the same band's going to play the very next night in Virginia, as opposed to going all the way into DC? And what are they saying about that competitor venue, right? And then finally, I think where the really a lot of the great insight from social listening and social intelligence can come about is when you get into the broader social web of topics. right? So anything that you are interested in analyzing, you can pull in specific phrases and say, okay, in this example, I want to see anytime someone is saying the phrase family friendly and arena in the same social post. And here I'm able to see, get a great insight into, Paul Taylor 88, who's asking, I really wish there was a family section when I take my kids to a rock show. Right? If you didn't have a social intelligence tool and a process in place to be able to monitor and analyze that conversation, you're going to miss that insight. But you're probably asking what conversation is available. And so not all conversations available, and that's the right way that it should be. There are some channels that are more closed off. Facebook and LinkedIn, really from a social listening perspective, social conversation analysis perspective, they're completely closed off. What you can get is more of if you authenticate your Facebook page, your brand's Facebook page, or your brand's LinkedIn page within these tools, you're able to pull in the comments that have come on from your specific posts, right? So people that have commented on your posts over the last year, you're going to be able to pull in all that information and kind of, instead of reading through it individually and manually, it'll all be pulled in a way that you can very easily analyze through word clouds and sentiment, what people are saying positively, negatively, neutrally. And so, it's a great way to at least get a good handle on what people are saying in commentary on your brand's posts. On the flip side, Twitter is 100% open. It's kind of the nature of the channel. Everything is about trying to get, to connect with other people and get your content out there and retweeted. And therefore, Twitter, by its very nature, is 100% open. And so you're able to pull in anytime someone tweets about the topic that you're searching for, and both currently and historically. And so there's a lot of great kind of wealth of insight into every topic you can think of within Twitter. Instagram is kind of in between, right? So Instagram, you're not able to pull in everything like Twitter, but you can select specific hashtags, and you can say, okay, I want to make sure that I'm monitoring for hashtag live music, hashtag concerts. Maybe it's a hashtag for a band that's about to come to your arena, and you want to see what people are saying about that band, right? Or or hashtag NBA playoffs, right? Or whatever it might be, you're going to want to select the specific hashtags that make the most sense for you. And then the other piece to the social intelligence tools that's really incredibly insightful is that it's not just about social channels. You also can pull in any public-facing blog or forum mention, which includes Reddit. There's a significant amount of conversation on Reddit, especially in the music space and in the sports space. And then you also are able to pull in news sources. So if you're looking for articles that are mentioning your arena, right, or articles that are mentioning your industry, well, you can pull in all those, and actually it gives you the ability to sort those by the most social influence. So maybe all the major news articles or news outlets all had an article that was relatively similar about the same story, but what you can find out through these tools is that actually the ABC News article was actually more socially influential and drove more social shares than the CNN article, the CNN version of the same story, right? So then you can start to get some insight into what news organizations are the most influential when they're talking about you. And then finally, reviews. This is where it really depends on the review site. Some of them are open, like more kind of experience review sites like TripAdvisor, which is great because you can pull in when people are talking about your venue or your experience, and you can see what people are saying about that on review sites like TripAdvisor. Others are more closed off. So like product review sites, Amazon.com is closed off, Walmart.com, Target.com, things like that. And the other piece, before I kind of move on to the value of social intelligence and some examples, is that you might notice that there are some social channels that are not listed on this slide. And that's because, channels like TikTok, channels like Snapchat, they are not providing this type of insight to third-party tools. You kind of have to be a little bit more scrappy with that. And so, sneak peek to what I'll talk about at the end about being scrappy. absolutely be active on those channels, not just as a brand, but also personally, so that you can be searching the hashtags on TikTok, on the different other channels to see, what's naturally driving conversation and what's trending in the area of your industry. What people are saying about a certain band or a certain venue, etc. That's kind of the Scrappy way of going about it, because those channels do not pull in any information into these tools like Twitter or Instagram does. So why is social intelligence important? I mean, it's really, at its core, it's a never-ending treasure trove of perceptions on the world, right? It really, depending on what department you work in, you might find that there's some really meaningful insight in social media intelligence that you didn't really know you had the ability to analyze. I very often will hear from new clients of mine that they'll say, yeah, our social team has a social analytics tool, and they get what they need out of it, and that's it. No one else outside the social team sees those reports. And I always say, that what you need to do is just make sure that everyone's able to see those reports, because you never know what insight is going to be super helpful to other aspects of your organization. Whether it is just monitoring whether or not people are talking about your campaigns, people talking about a band coming to your arena, etc., from either traditional campaigns or digital social campaigns to PR crisis situations, right? Being able to have those dashboards monitoring anytime that a negative sentiment spike hits, and knowing within minutes that there's something going on at your arena or something related to your brand that you need to know about, because it could become a negative news story within a couple hours, right? And oftentimes with my clients, with social intelligence tools, you actually oftentimes are the first people to know about what's going on, and in the event and arena space, you have to think about, especially with what's going on with some of the recent stories in the NBA, with fans that are behaving badly in the stands and interacting with players, etc. Those are the situations where it can be an emerging PR situation, and having those alerts within minutes of social conversations spiking about that is really crucial to make sure that you have available, so that you know whether or not this is about to be on the headline news tonight, or if it's more kind of the trajectory is going to kind of be a blip and die down. Consumer research. One of the biggest things that we've done recently is related to pulling in all the conversation around COVID and vaccine. Anytime someone mentions COVID and vaccine in the same social post on public social, we're able to see that, and we're able to then zero in on specific areas of the country where actually looking at kind of the emotions of the conversation and what's driving the both positive and negative emotions around vaccine hope and vaccine hesitancy, and that can help you to understand, as a leading indicator, are people in our area of the country more or less hesitant, or more fearful or more hopeful about the vaccine and the future post-COVID in our area, which is a leading indicator as to whether or not they might want to come back to see live events, or if they're still kind of hesitant to do so. There are plenty of other examples. Partner spokesperson evaluation that we'll get into in terms of audience segmentation is extremely important, where you're able to look at people who follow this brand, who are also what are their interests outside of just following this brand? What TV shows are they into? What movies are they into? What influencers do they follow? What brands do they follow? Right, and from there you start to identify some partner and spokesperson potential, where you have a natural overlap in followers, and it makes sense for us to partner together, right? You got the data point to tell that partner that. Competitive intelligence, I kind of touched on with the Eagle Bank Arena and the Anthem example. Product feedback, absolutely. Thinking about pulling in conversation around your venue, and then bucketing that by, like, what are people saying about ticketing? What's the sentiment around parking? What's the sentiment around concessions, etc., to see where are the pain points in the experience. And then finally, customer service. I mean, to what I was mentioning at the very beginning, you need to make sure that you're not just waiting for someone to tag you into a post. If they are having a negative experience at your event and they are talking about it on Twitter and they just haven't necessarily tagged you into a post, you wouldn't know that that's happening unless you have a tool that's in place and a process in place to make sure that you're monitoring that and you can engage with that person in real time while they are still in the arena and resolve the situation. So let's kind of walk through a couple examples, right? Because I've kind of talked about the value of it, but let's kind of see it in action, right? So first, from a social listening perspective, like I mentioned before, this is we pulled in all conversation around COVID vaccine, and this is looking at a U.S. view of public social media conversation and looking at a breakdown of the different emotions that people are saying within the COVID vaccine conversation, and then diving even further into what's driving anger or fear or joy or hope around the COVID vaccine, and then zeroing in on a specific area of the country to be able to say people are more hopeful in our area than they are nationally, or people are less hopeful than they are nationally. That's an extremely important insight, like I said earlier, as a leading indicator as to whether or not fans are going to come back. Similarly, like I mentioned before, NBA fan behavior. So we are monitoring right now the NBA playoff conversation. Just anybody that's talking on social media about the NBA playoffs on public social or Reddit, and we are isolating the fan behavior situations, right? So anytime someone mentions fan and behavior in the same comment when they are also talking about the NBA, we're pulling in that and we're seeing what arenas are being talked about, and what are the hashtags that people are saying. Obviously, it's a serious conversation, and it can be a potential PR issue for a venue. And so, making sure that you have your finger on the pulse of what people are saying about it is absolutely crucial to make sure that you are making the right business decisions around how to protect the players and protect the other fans around you in the arena. We also looked recently at the NCAA women's basketball tournament. So when Sedona Prince tweeted out about the weight room inequities that the women's college basketball athletes were having versus the men's, we were able to see very quickly just the sheer volume of conversation that generated versus some of the other topics that were being talked about at the same time on the men's side, like hashtag not NCAA property, right? And so that's just another example of monitoring culture to see what people are saying and how that social was really ready to drive home a conversation that Sedona spiked by just a really strong example of an inequity that needs to be righted. Right, and so social was able to very quickly explode that conversation and retweet her post, and then ultimately Dick's Sporting Goods got involved. Right, and so the on the left side and on the previous slides, those were social listening examples from Talkwalker. On the right side, on the bottom there, you'll see a media value. That's actually a tool we use called Zoomf that is able to actually give an estimate of the media value of a brand's tweet when they jump in to help out a situation. And so just from showing up, Dick's Sporting Goods showing up with some fitness equipment to try to right the situation, they were able to generate a significant amount of value from that, as well as a significant amount of favorability from women's college basketball fans that were saying thank you for stepping up as a brand. Audience segmentation. I think this is a huge one for the event marketing industry. So this is an example from a tool called Helixa, where we looked at the audience of DC music fans and broke them down by different genres. So heavy metal versus country versus rock. And then we were able to look at the reach and affinity of people who are fans of that style of music in the DC area. What's their affinity towards different venues in the area? And so we can very quickly see is that Jiffy Lube Live is doing a pretty good job when it comes to heavy metal and rock, but they're not getting as much affinity when it comes to country. And so, that right there is an insight in terms of what do we need to do in terms of landing a really strong country music band or artist to be able to come and really, get people excited about country music at our venue. Another audience segmentation example, looking at pulling in the interests of a certain venue's followers. So again, going back to the Anthem DC as an example, not just looking at the demographics, what's the gender and age bracket of people who follow the Anthem, but also more kind of meaningfully on the bottom left are what TV shows they like. Right, so The Daily Show, Game of Thrones, Star Wars, Firefly Music Festival. Right there, there's some interesting kind of creative that you can try to weave in as part of your experience to see whether or not there are ways to actually have a really interesting partnership and unique partnership within your venue, and it would really delight the fans of the Anthem who are telling you that they are fans of these shows. On the right side, you can also see that they are fans of Stone Brewing more than any other craft beer. And so, making sure that you've got Stone Brewing on tap is crucial because that's what the Anthem DC followers want. And then flipping that and looking at a band, right? So if you look at Cage the Elephant and the interests of Cage the Elephant followers, right? Besides their demographics, you're also seeing that actually they're really into gaming, right? And so actually on the top right, you're seeing that Cage the Elephant followers are actually more into PlayStation and League of Legends than they are Xbox or Nintendo. And so actually, that's a great example of if Cage the Elephant is about to come to your venue, maybe you do some kind of interesting, giveaway or promotion or experience in the venue related to PlayStation or related to League of Legends. Influencer evaluation. This is where you've got the millions of followers that are out there across the millions of influencers across social media that are out there, using tools like Tagger Media to be able to kind of zero in on the right influencers that make the most sense for your upcoming campaign. So this is an example from a hotel brand that we worked with that were looking to connect with foodies. And so we were able to quickly find the influencers that had a social following that made the most sense for that campaign, and that ultimately drove the most engagement and the most conversation when that campaign launched. So just putting some data behind who might be the right influencer to reach out to. Another example from an influencer perspective, we worked with a sports apparel brand where we were asked to evaluate the influencers that they had worked with over the past year. And so there, what we were able to do is say, actually look at not just the follower size, which is the size of the circles, but also the affinity and the number of times that they post about the brand. And so, making sure that you're not just working with the A-list celebrities that have the huge following, but they're going to post about you one time because that's what they're contractually obligated to do. Find your super fans. Ashley Horner in the top left there, she posted 185 times about this sports apparel brand over the course of a year. She's your super fan, and she's got 25,000 or so followers on Instagram. She's the type of person that you actually should be working with more often, as opposed to the A-list celebrity who is only going to kind of check the box and maybe tweet about you one time. And finally, platform performance as an example. This is another hotel hotel example where we were working with a hotel brand they were about to come out with a new set of offerings for their breakfast. And so they wanted to see what are people saying on social media, what are brands saying on social media that's working well when a hospitality brand talks about breakfast, right? So what we were able to do with a tool called Unmetric is pull in any of the brands over the last year or so that have posted about breakfast, and then see what's the most engaging content. So not just their direct competitors, but the entire hospitality category, every brand that's categorized as hospitality on social media, what's working for them when they talk about breakfast. And then scorecarding that on the left side versus your direct competitive set and your own client brand to see where do you need the most help in terms of different channels and how you're engaging on those channels when it comes to your current content related to that topic. So I know that was a lot, and so ultimately, kind of wanted to step back now and go through a couple slides to finish it off around how do I get started, right? So ultimately, you want to make sure that you are able to walk away from this session with not just, okay, this is great and there's a lot of value to social intelligence and I've got some examples, but how do I actually, get started tomorrow? with social intelligence within our organization. First and foremost, understand your objectives. Make sure that you are asking the right business questions before you get started with social intelligence. So what I mean by that is, thinking about what business questions you're looking to answer as an organization that you believe that social media research could answer. And do we even know all of our objectives yet, or do we need to kind of do like a needs gathering exercise internally across all of our different departments of our organization to see, okay, well, can we actually get insight into X, Y, or Z, right? Get that list together of what your objectives are, and then start to go through the rest of the steps. Take stock of your internal capability. Right. So if we were to invest in a tool or a set of tools, et cetera, does someone on the team have the time and the comfort level to do this and get the most insight out of it? Can our current analytics team take this on? Do we have people on our analytics team that have the comfort level to be able to work with these and familiarity to work with these tools? Or is this something that we want to take out to outsourcing? Then you want to look at, understanding the value and your budget. So not just thinking, okay, well, here's the budget that we can put behind potentially getting a tool, but ultimately go back to the objectives in the first step and say, if we knew the answers to these key business questions, how much would that be worth to our organization? And ultimately from there, you're going to be able to see, okay, if we knew that insight, then we would want to be able to invest X in social intelligence from a tool and a staff perspective to make sure that we can have that insight on a regular basis. That's going to kind of tie back the objective to the budget, as opposed to just saying, yeah, we only have X amount to work with in terms of investing in this. And then finally, once you've done all of that, then pressure test the tools, right? So, make sure that you are, you're thinking about what's the volume of conversation you're looking to analyze, how much historical conversation we need to go back and pull, what are the topics that at any one time and how many that you want to be analyzing, because all of those are going to dictate what pricing packages and what tools you want to work with. And so making sure you have that before you kind of go in to pressure test the tools is really important. And so you might be thinking, what are the tools, right? So I'm going to send over this deck to anyone that wants it. So just feel free to shoot me an email or hit me up on LinkedIn after this. So you don't need to worry about kind of screenshotting this right now. But ultimately, these are the tools that we have worked with in the past with our clients and what we feel are the strongest tools out there. There are probably 100 logos that are not on this list, because there are many different tools out there if you just start a Google search around social intelligence or social analytics, social listening, etc. But these are the tools that we feel really would work well across answering any social media research question. And so really it's just about, again, understand your objectives and see, okay, well, most of the questions that we're looking to answer can come from a social listening tool, so let's invest in a social listening tool. Or actually, you know what, it's actually more important when we get one of the audience segmentation tools, because then we can really start to understand partnership opportunities, right? So it can kind of dictate which partners and which tools you want to reach out to pressure test. And then finally, to finish it off, thinking about the scrappy ways of doing this, right? So you might say, this is all great, but we don't have the ability to really invest much in this arena. And so how can we do this on a scrappy level? And so first and foremost, from a social listening perspective, start with Hootsuite, TweetDeck, things like that. Make sure that you are using those tools to be able to at least pull in all the conversation around your brand, as well as the conversation around your competitors, so that you're able to at least get started with some high-level social listening. And then for the social channels that are not available via the Hootsuites of the world and the larger tools that I mentioned on the previous slide, like TikTok, like Snapchat, things like that, make sure that you're active on those channels and that you're searching for hashtags and trending topics. to make sure that you have a finger on the pulse of what is trending that's relevant to you, and what content's working well, from a consumer perspective. That's going to give you great insight for the channels that are not as open to being pulled in the conversation into these social listening tools. You also, if you're using a content management tool for social media, a lot of them have high-level social listening capabilities within the broader stack of all the things that they can do. So if your organization is already invested in Sprout Social or Social Bakers or one of those, then you do have the ability to get some high-level insight there from social listening if you set up your queries. There are limitations, of course, for the kind of the scrappy way of going about it. You're not going to get as much historical conversation, so perception shifts over time. You're not going to be able to see. It's more about kind of the snapshot right now, but at least gives you a good ability to get started. Audience analysis. Absolutely take full advantage of the back-end analytics sections of the social channels themselves, because they're going to be able to tell you a good amount about your own audience. So, Facebook analytics, Twitter analytics, etc., just to be able to understand your own audience, where they are, what are they into, and it gives you a good amount of just kind of high-level information about them. It's not going to give you the overlaps between your audience and other brands or influencers, etc., that you might want to partner with, but it at least can give you a good start. And then also, I like to kind of test the audience sizes in the ads manager tools, because that's kind of a great way, a scrappy way of doing some research into potential custom audiences that you want to target, right? And how big are those audiences? From an influencer evaluation perspective, same thing from the social listening side. Make sure you're active on the channels. Search for those hashtags natively on all of the different social channels, whether those be Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, etc., and see who's being featured. See who's bubbling up to the top, because those are the influencers that are likely driving the most reach. At the same time, the one limitation with that is that you're not going to be able to see necessarily how authentic that influencer is and who is actually in their audience, because there are other tools that I didn't mention earlier, like Silo, that actually are able to authenticate an influencer and see whether or not they have any bots as some of their reach and engagement, or whether or not it's truly authentic engagement. You're not going to get that level without a tool, but you can at least start to search for the hashtags and see which influencers are being featured within each hashtag. And then there are some kind of free or inexpensive tools that help specifically on Instagram, like Upfluence as an example, that you might want to take a look at. And then last but not least, platform performance. A lot of the tools will be able to help you streamline at least your own brand social performance, like Dash This is a good example there. They're not going to be able to give you much on your competitors, but at the same time, you're at least going to be able to see what's working well and what's not from our perspective. And then, same thing that I mentioned on the social listing side. Some of the content management tools are going to give you the high-level ability to see what competitive tracking looks like in terms of your competitors' post engagement on their public social channels. The limitation really only being that you're only going to be able to see your own post engagement and maybe some direct competitors, as opposed to the broader industry, like I was mentioning with tools like Unmetric. So I know that was a lot, and I believe that we have a couple minutes for questions. So definitely, if there are any questions in the chat, I would love to cover them right now. We're also going to be in our booth tomorrow at 2 o'clock. So if you want to weigh in there, we can also continue this conversation. So yeah, any questions?
Yeah, there are some questions in the chat, so I'll read Kim's question first. She says, "Great info, Frank. What would you say is the most common mistake organizations make in their social listening / social intelligence efforts?"
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say that the most common mistake, first and foremost, is they'll immediately say, "Oh, well, we need to do social listening, and so let's go get a tool." And so the first thing they'll do is go, research the different tools and say, okay, now, hey, guess what, everyone, we have a tool. And then what they find is that maybe they have a basic package that doesn't give them the ability to kind of get the topic level analysis that they really need, because they're limited by the volume of conversation that can pull in based on the pricing package. They didn't think about that beforehand. Or maybe they get a tool and then no one has any time to really set it up the right way to make sure that you've got the right queries running and the dashboards and alerts and all that good stuff. So making sure that you are thinking from an objective standpoint first. What are our business objectives? And if we were to invest in a tool ourselves, who has the ability, realistically, not like outside their day job, but realistically, who has time within our organization to be able to really dive in and make sure that we're set up correctly? Because the tool reps are only going to get you so far, and then it's kind of on you. So make sure that you've got like your strategy first before you just jump in and say, okay, we're just going to go sign a tool.
And Sheila also is asking, can you give an idea of price ranges for these tools?
Sure. So some of the basic packages of some of the listening tools that are out there, if you just are looking to be able to analyze your brand and maybe your direct competitor conversation and your local area, some of these tools can be in the 6 to 10K a year range. So spread that out over 12 months. It becomes pretty reasonable to get kind of the basic packages. If you want kind of the enterprise level research packages where you're going to be analyzing like the millions and millions of conversations, those can get to be more on the expensive side. So anywhere from 40 to probably about 75K. But it really depends on what you're looking for. And that's, again, why I would say start off with doing this on a Scrappy basis, right? Think about what you can do from a Scrappy basis, and then think about your business objectives and what really we're looking to analyze to get started before you go out and start to pressure test some of the tools that are a little bit more expensive, because you might be able to find within a basic package that you're able to get started with these tools, and it won't be a too much of a significant investment from a tool perspective.
People can feel free to ask questions out loud too, if they'd like. They don't have to type them in the chat.
I'll take myself off. Now I can see you all again. Yeah. Any other questions at this point? If not, then what I would just say is absolutely join us tomorrow at 2 o'clock from our sponsor booth, and we can absolutely answer any questions. A lot of times when I present this, at first it's like, wow, that was a lot. I'm not really sure what to do with it. But then as you kind of think through the different examples and think about your organization, there's actually a lot of great stuff that you can start to kind of brainstorm around within your organization. So happy to brainstorm with you tomorrow in the sponsor booth. Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Frank. That was a great session. All right. We're going to see everybody at the mixer later. Get your adult beverages. It's going to be a good party.
Sounds good. All right. We'll see you all there. Bye.